She had always been quiet, the kind of student who rarely spoke in class and mostly kept to herself. Teachers often overlooked her, thinking she was just another average student. Her classmates sometimes ignored her too, chatting in groups and sharing jokes while she quietly watched, smiling politely when addressed. Music class was the one place she felt at peace, the one space where the outside world faded away, and only the notes on the page mattered. But even there, nobody really knew what she was capable of. That morning, the classroom was buzzing with chatter. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting soft shadows across the polished wooden floors. She took her usual seat at the far corner of the room, notebook in hand, quietly observing the excitement around her. Today was supposed to be a regular practice day, but the music teacher had a different plan. He strode in with a serious expression, a stack of sheet music in his arms. "Class," he began, his voice cutting through the chatter. "I have a surprise for you." A ripple of groans and murmurs spread across the room. Surprises in school rarely meant anything good. "We are going to have a performance test today," he continued. "Each of you will play a very challenging piano piece. I want to see your technique, your expression, and your ability to handle difficult music." Her heart skipped a beat. She glanced at the other students, who were already whispering nervously to each other. A few rolled their eyes. Some looked panicked. Most of them had never attempted anything this hard before. The sheet music was notoriously difficult, full of fast scales, sharp notes, and long, complicated chords. For beginners, it seemed almost impossible. She felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. Not from fear, but from anticipation. She had secretly practiced pieces far more difficult than this one, at home, late at night, when nobody was around. Her parents didn't know how skilled she was, and the school certainly didn't either. She had kept it a secret, enjoying the music for herself rather than for recognition. But now, standing in front of the class, she realized that this would be the first time anyone outside her small home world would hear her play. The teacher handed out the music sheets one by one. When it was her turn to receive one, she took it calmly, scanning the first few lines of notes. Her eyes moved quickly, but her expression remained neutral. The other students looked overwhelmed, some whispering, "How are we even supposed to play this?" Some looked hopeless, flipping the pages with trembling hands. She, on the other hand, felt a spark of excitement. The complexity of the piece didn't scare her. It invited her in. The bell rang, signaling the start of the practice session. One by one, students walked to the piano at the front of the room, nervously pressing keys, fumbling through the scales, and making mistakes. A few stumbled over the tricky rhythms, and some gave up halfway through, muttering complaints under their breath. The classroom was filled with off-key notes and hesitant taps. When her turn approached, the room seemed to grow quieter. She stood up and walked toward the piano, her posture calm, her steps measured. Every eye in the room turned toward her, some out of curiosity, some out of disbelief. After all, she was the quiet one, the one nobody expected anything from. She sat down, placing her hands gently on the keys. Her fingers hovered for a moment, feeling the familiar smoothness of the piano surface. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes briefly, as if connecting with the music before even playing a single note. When she opened her eyes, she saw the expectant faces of her classmates and teachers staring back at her. Some smiled skeptically, as if daring her to fail. Then she began. The first notes flowed effortlessly. Her fingers moved with precision, touching each key lightly but confidently. The complicated chords, the fast runs, the tricky rhythms, everything seemed to fall perfectly into place. The music was alive, each note carrying emotion and clarity. It was as though the piano had been waiting for her all along, and she had been waiting to bring it to life. Her classmates' whispers faded into silence. Their jaws dropped slightly as they realized what they were hearing. The girl they had barely noticed was playing a piece that most of them could never imagine attempting. Even the teachers leaned forward, their eyes widening, trying to keep up with her speed and accuracy. She didn't rush. She didn't show off. Every movement was controlled, deliberate, and expressive. The notes sang clearly, carrying a richness that filled the room, reaching every corner of the classroom. She felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced in school before. For a few minutes, the world outside the piano didn't exist. There was only the music, only her fingers dancing across the keys. The complexity of the piece, the notes that twisted and turned in unexpected ways, would have been intimidating to anyone else. But to her, it was like a puzzle she had solved many times in the privacy of her room. Her hands seemed to know the path instinctively, gliding over the keys with elegance. The rhythm, the melody, the emotion, it all came together seamlessly. A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some covered their mouths in surprise. Others exchanged looks of disbelief, as if they were witnessing something magical. Even the teacher, who had assigned the piece to challenge the class, seemed momentarily speechless. He had expected mistakes, stumbles, and hesitation. Instead, he saw perfection, control, and emotion beyond her years. She reached the final measures, slowing slightly to let the last notes resonate. The final chord hung in the air, soft but powerful, echoing in the room. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, slowly, a few claps began, growing louder as everyone joined in. Some students stood up, cheering quietly, while others simply stared, unable to find words. The teacher nodded, a mixture of awe and pride on his face. She stood up, smiling softly. She had done it. The challenge that had seemed impossible to everyone else had been a moment of triumph for her. And yet, she didn't feel the need to boast or seek attention. She simply felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the music she loved so much had finally been shared with the world, even if only a small classroom. Her classmates began to approach her, some curious, others impressed. "I had no idea you could play like that," one whispered. Another said, "That was incredible." She nodded politely, her cheeks slightly flushed, but said little. She had never sought recognition. The joy of playing was enough for her. The teacher approached her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "I didn't know you were capable of that," he said sincerely. "That was extraordinary." She smiled quietly, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. For the first time, she realized that her secret talent was no longer just hers. It had touched others, even if only for a few minutes, and that felt powerful. As the class ended and students filed out, talking excitedly about the performance, she remained at the piano for a moment longer. Her hands lingered over the keys, remembering the feeling of the music flowing through her. She knew this was only the beginning. The teachers had underestimated her, and her classmates had been surprised. But more importantly, she had discovered that her passion and skill could speak for themselves, without words or explanations. That day, a quiet student had revealed a side of herself that nobody had expected. A girl who had always been overlooked had shown her true strength, not through words or actions, but through the music that flowed naturally from her hands. It was a moment that would be remembered, at least by those who had seen it, and a moment that changed her view of herself forever. Even as she left the classroom, she felt a sense of calm determination. She knew that more challenges would come, more opportunities to show her talent, and more moments when people would be surprised by her abilities. But she also knew something even more important. She could face those moments confidently, because she trusted herself and her music. And as she walked down the hallway, blending into the crowd once more, she carried a quiet secret with her. A secret that was no longer hidden, but ready to shine whenever the music called. After the class ended, she didn't rush out with the others. She lingered by the piano, letting her fingers rest lightly on the smooth keys. The echo of the last chord still filled her ears, and she felt a strange mix of satisfaction and nervous excitement. For years, she had played in secret, often late at night, when the house was quiet and her parents were asleep. She had never performed in front of anyone beyond her family. But now, a small audience had witnessed her playing, and the feeling was unlike anything she had imagined. Her classmates had returned to their seats, or had left the classroom entirely, whispering and gossiping about her performance. Some looked back at her with awe, unable to believe what they had just heard. She knew they would talk about it for days, maybe even weeks. It was a strange sensation, being noticed, not for her words or her grades, or even her polite behavior, but simply for the way she could make music come alive. Her music teacher, who had been the one to assign the difficult piece, approached her quietly. He seemed different from before. Less strict, more curious, almost cautious, as if he didn't want to startle her. "You play beautifully," he said, his voice soft but full of admiration. "I didn't realize you had this talent. How long have you been playing?" She smiled gently, trying to keep her modesty. "I've been practicing for years. Mostly at home on my own," she said. "I never really showed anyone. I just liked playing." The teacher nodded, studying her face for a moment. He seemed thoughtful, as if he was trying to understand how such skill could remain hidden for so long. "Well, it's clear now. You have something very special. You should consider sharing it more often." She nodded, though she didn't know if she was ready for that. Sharing her talent felt both exciting and frightening. She liked the comfort of anonymity, the freedom to play without pressure or expectation. Yet, a part of her was curious. What would it feel like to perform in front of a bigger audience, to let more people hear the music she had cherished in secret? As she packed her bag, a few classmates approached her hesitantly. "That was amazing," one whispered. "I didn't know you could play like that." Another added, "Seriously? How did you do it?" "That piece was impossible for me." She shrugged lightly, smiling politely. "I just practiced a lot," she said softly. She didn't want to sound boastful, but at the same time, she felt proud of what she had accomplished. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Even in subjects far from music, students kept stealing glances at her, whispering to each other about her performance. Teachers seemed to treat her differently, offering small nods of approval when she walked by. It was a new kind of attention, one that was neither overwhelming nor uncomfortable. It was respect, and she could feel it settling around her like a gentle warmth. Later that evening, she returned home and sat at the piano in her room. Unlike at school, this space was completely hers, familiar and safe. She ran her fingers over the keys, replaying the piece from memory. Every note, every chord, felt natural. She could feel the rhythm moving through her hands, the melody flowing freely. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that made music feel alive, as if the piano itself was listening. Her mind wandered as she played. She remembered the first time she had touched a piano, how awkward and clumsy her fingers had been. She remembered the countless hours she had spent practicing scales, practicing pieces far too difficult for her age, learning to listen to the subtle changes in sound and tempo. All those moments, spent alone in her room, had led her here. And now, for the first time, someone outside her family had witnessed it. The next morning, she arrived at school to find that her performance had already become the topic of conversation. Students who had previously ignored her were now looking at her with curiosity and admiration. Some smiled politely, others nodded in acknowledgement. Even teachers she rarely interacted with stopped by to say a few words of praise. She didn't seek attention, but it was impossible to avoid it now. During lunch, a group of students approached her table. They weren't the loud, popular crowd, but rather classmates who shared quiet interests: books, drawing, or music. "We heard you played yesterday," one said. "It was incredible. I wish I could play like that." She smiled, feeling slightly embarrassed by the attention. "Thank you," she said. "It just comes from practice. Anyone can improve if they really try." The conversation continued, and she found herself talking about music in a way she had never done before. She shared a little about her favorite composers, the pieces she enjoyed playing, and the joy she found in creating music. For the first time, she realized that people were genuinely interested in her perspective, not just her performance. After lunch, music class began again. The teacher had set up a new exercise, this time pairing students to play together in duets. When it was her turn, she was paired with a classmate who had some experience, though not nearly at her level. At first, the student seemed nervous, unsure how to match her tempo and expression. But she listened carefully, adjusting subtly to allow the duet to flow smoothly. By the end of the exercise, the teacher was smiling broadly. "Excellent work," he said. "It's clear you can not only play alone but also work beautifully with others. That's a rare skill." The praise made her feel both proud and motivated. She realized that her secret practice had not only made her skilled but also taught her patience and awareness. Skills that went beyond music itself. She began to think differently about her talent. It wasn't just a private joy anymore. It could connect with others, inspire them, and even teach them something new. Over the next few days, more students started to notice her quietly remarkable skill. They would stop by the piano during free periods, asking her to show them a few pieces or help them understand certain techniques. She obliged, always patient and encouraging, finding that she enjoyed sharing her knowledge almost as much as playing itself. Her talent, once hidden, began to have an impact on the people around her. Even the teachers, who had once underestimated her, now seemed to watch her with new respect. They would occasionally ask for her input during lessons, curious about her technique or her interpretations of the music. It was a shift she had never expected. The same classrooms that had overlooked her now felt full of possibility, a place where her skill could be recognized and appreciated. One afternoon, the music teacher approached her privately. "I've been thinking," he said thoughtfully. "Your performance yesterday was remarkable. Have you ever considered participating in a school concert? Maybe even a local competition?" She paused, her fingers brushing the keys absent-mindedly. Competitions had never been on her mind. She had played for herself, for the joy of music. But the idea sparked something within her, a curiosity, a desire to see how far her skill could go, and how it might touch more people beyond her small circle. I've never really thought about it," she admitted. "I just play because I love it." "I understand," he said kindly. "But sometimes, sharing what we love can be even more rewarding. I think people would be amazed if they heard you perform in a bigger setting. You have a gift, and it's worth sharing." She nodded slowly, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. The thought of performing for a larger audience was both thrilling and terrifying. Yet deep down she felt ready to take that step. Her practice, her dedication, and her love for music had brought her this far. Maybe now it was time to see where it could take her. That evening, she sat at her piano once again, replaying the piece she had performed for her class. She experimented with new interpretations, letting her emotions guide her fingers, exploring different rhythms and tempos. For the first time, she thought not just about perfection, but about expression, about making the music her own. She felt a new sense of freedom, as if the piano had become a doorway to a larger world, a world where her talent could grow and flourish. As the days passed, her confidence continued to build. She realized that being recognized didn't have to change who she was. She could remain quiet, humble, and focused, but also share her music in ways that inspired and connected with others. Her secret talent, once hidden, had found its voice, and with it, a new chapter of her life was beginning. A chapter full of possibilities, challenges, and the thrill of discovery. She knew one thing for certain: the world would never see her in the same way again. But that was okay. She was ready to show them not just her skill, but her heart, her passion, and the music that had always been a part of her. And as she pressed the final keys of the evening, letting the notes linger in the quiet room, she smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. The day of the school music event finally arrived. The gymnasium had been transformed into a small concert hall. Chairs were neatly lined up in rows, and a shiny black piano sat on a slightly raised stage. Soft lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the space. Parents, teachers, and students were slowly taking their seats, chatting quietly, unaware of what they were about to witness. She stood backstage, her hands lightly clasped together. The hum of conversation and the creaking of chairs filled the air, but inside her, there was a calm she had rarely felt before. It wasn't that she wasn't nervous. There was a flutter in her stomach, a quickening of her pulse. But it was different from fear. This was anticipation, the kind that made her fingers tingle with excitement, ready to bring the music to life. She had practiced every note, every chord, every tempo countless times. She knew the piece by heart. Yet, performing for an audience this large was unlike anything she had done before. The stage manager gave her a small nod. "You're up next." She took a slow, steadying breath and walked toward the stage. The audience's chatter faded as she approached the piano. When she reached it, she paused for a moment, taking in the sea of faces. Parents smiled politely, teachers nodded encouragingly, and students leaned forward in curiosity. A few of her classmates, the ones who had been stunned by her classroom performance, were watching with wide eyes. She sat down on the piano bench, adjusted her posture, and let her hands hover above the keys. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, feeling the familiar smoothness under her fingers. The first note came naturally, gentle and precise. Then the next and the next, each one flowing effortlessly into the next. The complicated piece, which had seemed daunting to everyone else, became a story told through her hands. From the very first bars, a hush fell over the audience. People leaned forward, drawn into the music. The melodies rose and fell like waves, carrying emotion and expression that seemed almost alive. Her fingers moved with grace, touching each key in perfect harmony. Fast runs, tricky chords, and sudden shifts in rhythm were handled with ease, as if she were born to play this piece. The audience couldn't look away. Some gasped softly at particularly impressive sections. Others whispered to the person next to them, "Did you see that?" Teachers watched with astonishment, impressed not only by her technical skill, but by the depth of feeling she poured into every note. She wasn't just playing the piano. She was telling a story. Her classmates, who had once thought of her as quiet and unremarkable, were now staring in disbelief. "I can't believe it," one murmured under her breath. "She's amazing," another added. "She makes it look so easy." It wasn't just her skill that captivated them, but the confidence and ease with which she played. There was no hesitation, no faltering, only music, pure and moving. As the piece continued, the gymnasium seemed to fade away. The chatter, the lights, the audience, all disappeared in her mind. It was just her, the piano, and the music. She felt every emotion in the melody, shaping it with her hands. Soft, gentle passages were full of tenderness, while louder, faster sections carried intensity and excitement. The piece seemed to breathe under her fingers, alive with energy and life. Halfway through, she glanced up briefly. The audience's faces were captivated, a mixture of admiration, awe, and disbelief. Parents whispered to each other, "I didn't know a student could play like this," and teachers exchanged glances, nodding silently. Even the principal, who rarely showed much emotion at student performances, had a small, impressed smile. She reached the middle section of the piece, where the tempo shifted and the chords became more complex. Her hands moved faster now, dancing across the keys with precision. Each note was clear, each chord resonant. The rhythm was perfect, yet full of feeling. Even though the piece was challenging, she played it effortlessly, as if it were second nature. A few students in the audience leaned closer to the stage, unable to contain their amazement. "Look at her hands," one whispered. "She's incredible," another added. "I've never seen anyone play like that." She didn't need to speak or explain. The music itself was enough to communicate her talent, her passion, and her dedication. As she approached the final section, the piece built to a powerful climax. The notes rose and fell, faster and higher, filling the room with a sound that seemed almost alive. Every eye in the audience was fixed on her. Teachers' mouths opened slightly in astonishment, and even the students who had once ignored her felt a mix of envy and admiration. They realized that all those quiet hours she had spent alone had not been wasted. She had transformed them into something extraordinary. Then came the final notes. She slowed her fingers, letting the chords resonate, hanging in the air long enough for everyone to feel their weight and beauty. When the last note faded, there was a brief moment of silence, a pause where the audience seemed to catch their breath. Then applause erupted, soft at first, then louder, until the entire room was clapping. Some students stood up, cheering quietly. Parents leaned forward, smiling proudly, and teachers clapped, some whistling softly in admiration. She sat back on the bench, letting her hands rest on her lap. Her heart was still racing, but it was a happy kind of excitement, the kind that comes when you've shared something important and it is received with appreciation. She looked up and saw the teacher who had encouraged her to perform, his eyes wide and sparkling. He mouthed, "Amazing," and she nodded, smiling softly. After the applause died down, a few students approached her, hesitant but eager. "That was unbelievable," one said. "How do you play like that?" "I just practice," she replied quietly, a small smile on her face. "It takes time, but anyone can improve if they really try." Another student added, "You make it look so easy. I've never seen anything like it." She simply nodded, feeling proud but humble. She didn't play for praise. She played because it was her passion. Yet, she couldn't deny the joy that came from seeing people moved by her music. Her teacher came forward, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You've got a gift," he said. "Not just talent, but emotion, expression, and control. That's rare. You should consider performing more often. People need to hear this." She nodded slowly. She had never imagined performing for a large audience, and the experience had been more thrilling than she could have expected. She felt a spark of possibility, the idea that her music could reach more people, inspire them, and even change the way they saw her. Over the next few minutes, she noticed something that surprised her. Her classmates, the ones who had once ignored or underestimated her, were now approaching her with curiosity and respect. Some asked questions about the piece, others asked her to show them a few techniques. She answered patiently, enjoying the chance to share her love for music. She realized that this was different from performing for strangers. This was sharing something personal, something meaningful, and seeing it appreciated was incredibly rewarding. Even after the event ended, people continued to talk about her performance. Teachers mentioned it in passing during other classes, students discussed it in the hallways, and some parents approached her at pickup to compliment her. She felt a mixture of pride and calm satisfaction. She had proven something not just to others but to herself. She had faced a challenge, stepped into the spotlight, and let her true talent shine. That night, she returned home and sat at her piano once more. The quiet of her room felt comforting after the excitement of the day. She replayed the piece, experimenting with new expressions, adding subtle variations, and exploring the depths of the music. The experience of performing in front of an audience had opened something new for her, a desire to grow, to share, and to explore the full potential of her skill. She realized that her journey was only beginning. The school performance had been a first step, a glimpse of what was possible when she trusted herself and her abilities. There would be more challenges ahead, more opportunities to perform, and more moments where she could surprise people with her talent. But she felt ready for them. She had discovered that her music could speak for her, express her feelings, and connect with others in ways that words never could. As she closed her piano and turned off the light, she smiled quietly. The applause, the admiration, the astonishment. It was all part of a larger story that was still unfolding. She knew that her life, her music, and her confidence were intertwined, and that each performance would shape her in new ways. The quiet girl who had once been overlooked had found her voice, and it was stronger and more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the journey ahead. Competitions, recitals, and concerts might await, but she felt a sense of calm determination. She would continue to practice, continue to explore her talent, and continue to share her music whenever the opportunity arose. And no matter what happened, she knew that the joy of playing, the connection between her hands and the piano, and the emotion she could convey through music would always be hers to hold and share. The next day at school, whispers followed her, but she didn't mind. She had discovered something important. That talent, when nurtured with dedication and passion, could not remain hidden forever. And sometimes the quietest people could create the loudest impact, simply by being themselves and trusting what they had to offer. After the school performance, everything seemed different. Even though she walked through the same hallways, sat in the same classrooms, and followed the same routine, people looked at her in a new way. Whispers followed her footsteps, not the mocking kind she had once been used to, but the kind filled with curiosity and respect. Teachers who had barely noticed her before nodded when she passed. Classmates who had once ignored her now glanced her way with something between surprise and admiration. It was strange to feel noticed, not for her grades, not for her politeness, but simply for what she could do with her music. At first, she tried to act as though nothing had changed. She still kept her head down in the hall, smiled politely when spoken to, and focused on her work quietly. But she could feel eyes watching her, following her every movement. It made her slightly self-conscious, even though she had always wanted people to see the real her. Now, for the first time, that was happening, and it felt both exciting and overwhelming. During music class, the teacher started the session by asking students about their impressions from the performance event. Some students shared their favorite parts, while others admitted they had been surprised by her playing. "I had no idea anyone could play like that," one classmate said shyly. "It was beautiful, and I didn't expect it at all." Another added, "You made the piece sound so natural. I could never imagine doing that." She smiled quietly, keeping her response simple. "Thank you. I've practiced a lot," she said softly. She didn't want to brag, even though the praise felt nice. She had always played for the music itself, not for applause or recognition. But hearing people appreciate her effort made her feel a warmth she hadn't expected. The music teacher looked at her seriously, his eyes kind but thoughtful. "Your performance yesterday wasn't just technically perfect," he said. "It had feeling, control, and expression. That's something rare. You've clearly worked hard, and it shows." She nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. Hard work had always been part of her life, but this acknowledgement made it feel worthwhile in a way she hadn't realized before. She realized that people were beginning to see her as more than the quiet girl in the corner. They were beginning to see her as someone capable, talented, and unique. After class, a few students approached her hesitantly. They weren't the loud, popular ones, but the ones who shared quiet interests like reading or drawing. "I wanted to say your performance was incredible," one said. "It inspired me to practice more myself." She smiled, feeling a connection she hadn't expected. Sharing music wasn't just about performing. It was about touching others, inspiring them, and showing them what was possible when someone devoted time and heart to their passion. Over the next few days, the change in perception continued. Students who had once ignored her started asking her questions about music. Some asked for tips on practicing, while others wanted to see her play pieces they couldn't manage themselves. She helped patiently, guiding their fingers over the keys, explaining simple techniques, and encouraging them to keep trying. She discovered that she enjoyed this teaching role almost as much as playing itself. Seeing someone light up when they finally got a tricky chord or rhythm reminded her of her own journey, and she felt proud to share that experience. Even teachers began noticing. The music teacher often invited her to assist during lessons, letting her demonstrate certain techniques or show how to interpret a difficult passage. She felt a mix of nervousness and excitement during these moments. Standing in front of classmates, showing them how to handle something challenging, gave her a confidence she had never felt before. She began to see her talent not as something private, but as something that could influence and inspire others. One day, the teacher pulled her aside privately after class. "I've been thinking about your performance," he said. "It wasn't just a school event. That level of skill could take you far if you wanted it to. Have you ever thought about participating in a larger concert or a competition?" She hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. Competitions and concerts had never been on her mind. She had always played for herself, for the quiet joy of music, not for awards or recognition. But the idea sparked something inside her. A sense of curiosity, a desire to see how far her abilities could reach. I haven't really thought about it," she admitted. "I just play because I enjoy it." "That's a good place to start," the teacher said, smiling. "But sometimes, Sharing what we love with more people can be even more rewarding. You have a rare talent. You could inspire many if you let people hear it. She nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. The thought of performing for a larger audience was thrilling, but also intimidating. She had never sought attention beyond the classroom, and suddenly the idea of standing on a bigger stage seemed overwhelming. Yet deep down she felt ready to explore it. Later that week, during a free period, a small group of students gathered around her at the piano. They asked her to play a few of her favorite pieces. She obliged, letting her fingers dance across the keys, and they watched in awe. Some whispered quietly, trying not to disturb the others in the library nearby. Others leaned closer, mesmerized by how naturally the notes flowed from her hands. She realized that her music had the power to captivate, even without a formal stage or audience. The attention wasn't always easy. Some students still struggled to reconcile the quiet girl they had ignored with the prodigious talent they were now seeing. A few muttered under their breath, questioning why she had kept her ability hidden for so long. But she didn't mind. She had her reasons, and she had always played for herself first. Recognition was a pleasant side effect, not the goal. One afternoon, the principal called her into the office. He had heard from the music teacher about her performance and wanted to speak with her personally. "I wanted to congratulate you," he said kindly. "Your performance has been the talk of the school. It's not just about talent. It's about dedication, passion, and the way you express yourself through music. You've inspired a lot of people already." She felt a warm flush on her cheeks but said only, "Thank you." The principal smiled. "Have you thought about performing outside of school? There are local events, competitions, and even small concerts where someone with your skill could shine. I think it would be a wonderful experience for you." She nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Performing for more people in a bigger setting was both intimidating and exhilarating. But she realized that it was an opportunity she couldn't ignore. Her secret talent had finally been recognized, and now it was time to consider sharing it with the wider world. That evening, she returned to her piano at home. She sat in silence for a moment, letting her hands hover above the keys. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that made music feel alive. She replayed the piece she had performed at school, experimenting with subtle changes in tempo and expression. She discovered new ways to interpret the music, ways that expressed her feelings more fully. The experience of performing for an audience had given her new insight into her own playing. She realized that her music was not just about technical skill. It was about emotion, connection, and communication. When she played, she could tell a story, convey a feeling, and touch the hearts of others. That realization filled her with a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. The next day at school, whispers followed her again, but they no longer made her anxious. They were filled with curiosity, admiration, and encouragement. She had changed, too, not just in the eyes of others but in her own mind. She felt more confident, more capable, and more ready to embrace opportunities she had never considered before. During music class, the teacher assigned a new exercise, one that required students to improvise and interpret a short melody in their own way. She approached it with excitement, letting her fingers explore, creating new harmonies and rhythms that surprised even herself. Her classmates watched, impressed by her creativity and control. It wasn't just that she could play difficult pieces. She could make them her own, transforming notes on a page into something personal and expressive. By the end of the week, her reputation as a talented pianist had spread even further. Students who had once ignored her were now asking for lessons, tips, or even just to watch her play. Teachers consulted her for demonstrations during lessons. Parents who had attended the school event stopped by to compliment her. And she, quietly and modestly, continued to play, practice, and explore the music that had always been her passion. She realized that being recognized wasn't a burden. It was an opportunity. Her talent had the power to inspire others, to bring joy, and to open doors she hadn't imagined before. And while she still enjoyed the quiet, private moments of practice, she understood that sharing her music could create moments of magic for other people. That weekend, she sat at her piano for hours, replaying her performance, exploring new pieces, and imagining what it would feel like to perform for an even larger audience. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves, but mostly, she felt purpose. Her talent, once hidden, was no longer a secret. It had the power to reach people, inspire them, and change the way they saw her. And as she pressed the final keys that night, letting the notes linger in the quiet room, she smiled. She had started to understand something important. True talent isn't meant to stay hidden forever. When nurtured with dedication, practiced with love, and shared with courage, it has the power to captivate, inspire, and leave a mark on the world. For the first time, she didn't just play for herself. She played for the people who would hear her music, for the classmates who were discovering her talent, and for the teachers who were beginning to see her in a new light. She played for the possibility of a future filled with music, challenges, and growth. A future she was finally ready to embrace. After her performance at the school event, things began to change in ways she hadn't expected. At first, it was small things. Students saying hello more warmly in the halls, teachers nodding with recognition, and a few classmates asking questions about her music. But soon, the attention became bigger, more noticeable, and a little harder to ignore. Her quiet life, once full of private practice and secret enjoyment, was slowly opening into a world of possibilities she had never imagined. It started with invitations to play in front of others outside the classroom. The music teacher suggested she join the next school assembly, not just to perform one piece, but to play a short concert. "You have the ability to inspire people," he told her. "Even a few minutes of your music can change how they feel. You should share it." She hesitated at first. She loved music, but performing in front of a larger audience was daunting. The thought of stepping onto a stage with dozens of people watching made her stomach twist. But at the same time, she felt a pull she couldn't resist. She had practiced her whole life, hidden in quiet rooms and late-night sessions, and now she had a chance to show what she could do. The assembly arrived faster than she expected. The gym was filled with students, teachers, and a few parents who had come to watch. She walked to the stage quietly, her heart beating steadily but with excitement. The piano stood in the center, black and polished, waiting. She took her seat and let her fingers hover over the keys. She remembered the applause from the school performance and felt a little more confident. When she began playing, the room grew silent. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, creating a sound that was both strong and gentle. Each note seemed to carry her emotions, her dedication, and her love for music. She played not just the notes on the page, but the story behind them. The countless hours she had spent practicing, learning, and perfecting every movement. By the end of the piece, the audience erupted into applause. Students clapped, teachers smiled broadly, and even parents looked surprised and impressed. She stood and bowed slightly, letting the moment sink in. For her, it wasn't about being recognized. It was about sharing something she loved with others and seeing them respond with appreciation. After the assembly, the music teacher approached her with a warm smile. "You've grown so much," he said. "Your confidence is shining through. Have you thought about competing outside of school? There are local contests, youth competitions, and even community concerts. You could reach an even bigger audience." She nodded slowly, thinking about what that would mean. Competitions were new territory, and the thought of them made her nervous. But she also felt a spark of curiosity. What would it be like to perform for strangers who didn't know her at all? What could she discover about her talent if she stepped outside her comfort zone? Over the next few weeks, she began practicing more seriously. Each session felt different now. She wasn't just playing for herself. She was preparing for opportunities that could shape her future. She focused on expression as much as technique, learning to convey emotions through every chord, every rhythm, every pause. The piano became not just a tool, but a partner, helping her tell stories that words could never capture. Her classmates continued to watch in awe. Some sought her advice, wanting to learn even a fraction of what she knew. She helped patiently, showing them small techniques and encouraging them to practice consistently. Teaching others gave her a new perspective, She realized that sharing her knowledge didn't diminish her own talent. It made it grow. One afternoon, the music teacher pulled her aside with an envelope in his hand. "A local music society is hosting a youth recital next month," he said. "They've heard about your school performance and invited you to participate. It's a small event, but it's a chance to perform in front of people outside school. Are you interested?" Her heart skipped a beat. The idea of performing outside her familiar environment was intimidating, but also thrilling. She thought about all the years she had spent practicing alone, about all the pieces she had mastered quietly. Now there was a chance to show what she could do to a new audience. I think I'd like to try," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "Excellent," the teacher said. "I'll help you prepare. This will be a great experience for you." From that day, her practice became more focused. She spent hours refining the piece she planned to perform, paying attention to every detail. She experimented with tempo and expression, trying to bring out the emotion behind each chord. Her family noticed the change too. Her parents had always supported her quietly, but now they began to understand the seriousness of her commitment. They watched in awe as she practiced, occasionally offering words of encouragement. At school, news of her upcoming recital spread. Students whispered excitedly, teachers discussed her skill with curiosity, and a few even made jokes about how they had underestimated her. She didn't mind the attention. It was different from before. It wasn't about being noticed or praised. It was about preparing for something important. The day of the recital arrived. The room was small but filled with anticipation. Chairs were arranged neatly. A few parents and music enthusiasts had gathered, and the piano gleamed under the soft stage lights. She felt a flutter of nerves but also a growing excitement. This was a new stage, a new audience, and a new opportunity. She sat down, closed her eyes briefly, and let her fingers hover above the keys. When she began, the music filled the room like it had filled her heart countless times before. Every note was deliberate, every chord expressive, every rhythm alive. The audience listened in awe, captivated by the depth and precision of her playing. For a few moments, it felt like the room had disappeared, leaving only her and the music. When she finished, the applause was immediate. Some stood, clapping and cheering. A few whispered to each other in amazement. Her teacher, who had accompanied her, smiled proudly. She stood and bowed, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. This was more than recognition. It was validation that all her effort, dedication, and passion had led to something meaningful. After the recital, people came to speak with her. A few parents asked if she would consider lessons for younger students. A music instructor from a nearby academy complimented her and suggested she consider more formal training. Even the audience members, who had never met her before, approached her with warm words. She listened politely, feeling a mixture of humility and pride. She had shared her music with strangers, and they had responded with appreciation and admiration. At school the following week, students and teachers alike were buzzing with excitement. "Did you hear about her recital?" one student whispered. "She was incredible." Another added, "I wish I could play like that. She makes it look so easy." She walked through the hallways quietly, smiling politely, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and calm. She had faced a challenge, shared her talent, and been recognized for it. Yet, she still felt grounded, knowing that her love for music came first. Recognition was wonderful, but it wasn't the goal. It was a byproduct of her dedication and passion. Her music teacher approached her again after class. "You've grown so much in a short time," he said. "Your talent is undeniable, and your confidence is increasing. Have you thought about long-term plans for your music? Perhaps formal training, advanced courses, or larger competitions?" She paused, considering the question carefully. She had always focused on the present, practicing, performing, and enjoying the music. But now, the thought of a future where her skill could reach new heights was exciting. She could pursue more formal training, attend advanced classes, and even participate in national competitions. The possibilities seemed endless. I think I'd like to explore it," she said finally. I've always loved playing, but now I want to see how far I can go. The teacher nodded, a smile spreading across his face. That's a wise decision. You have the talent, the discipline, and the heart to succeed. I'll support you however I can. Over the next few weeks, she began to balance her regular schoolwork with more focused practice sessions. She explored more challenging pieces, experimented with expression, and studied different composers. She even began teaching a few students who wanted to learn, discovering a new joy in helping others grow. Each day, her confidence grew, and so did her understanding of what it meant to be a musician. Her classmates continued to watch in awe, inspired not only by her skill, but by her dedication and humility. Even those who had once doubted her talent began to see her in a new light. She was no longer just a quiet student in the corner. She was someone who could captivate an audience, inspire others, and achieve remarkable things through practice and passion. By the end of the term, it was clear that her life had changed. She had discovered a new level of recognition, opportunities, and confidence. But she remained grounded, knowing that her love for music and her dedication to practice were the true sources of her strength. Recognition was welcome, but it was her connection to the piano and the joy of playing that mattered most. And as she sat at the piano one quiet evening, playing a piece she had never attempted before, she felt a deep sense of purpose. Her talent had opened doors, inspired others, and shown her that the possibilities were endless. She smiled softly, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with music, growth, and the power to touch people's hearts in ways words never could. By the time the next school year began, she had changed in ways that were both obvious and subtle. People noticed her confidence, the calm way she carried herself, and the gentle pride in her accomplishments. Yet she was still the same quiet, thoughtful student who loved to play music for the joy of it. The difference was that now, her music had a voice beyond her room, beyond her small circle, and she had started to understand the power it held. Opportunities continued to come. The local music society had invited her to perform at a community concert, and a few other schools had heard about her skill and asked if she would play at their events. She was nervous about each new invitation, but each time she performed, she felt a deeper sense of fulfillment. Her fingers moved with confidence, her expression flowed naturally, and her connection to the piano grew stronger. Every performance taught her something new, not just about music, but about herself. One afternoon, her music teacher approached her with an envelope in hand. "I have news," he said, a proud smile on his face. "A regional music competition is coming up, and they want you to participate. This is a big step. It will be challenging, but I believe you can do it." She held the envelope tightly, her heart racing. A competition was different from a school assembly or a local recital. It would be formal, judged by experienced musicians, and filled with talented performers from many places. The thought was both exciting and intimidating. She had never sought fame or awards, but the chance to test her abilities, to see how far her dedication could take her, filled her with determination. I think I'd like to try," she said, her voice steady. The teacher nodded, full of encouragement. "Good. You have the skill, the heart, and the discipline. Prepare well, and remember that this is about sharing your music, not just winning. Let your passion guide you." From that day on, her practice took on a new intensity. She worked on her technique, her expression, and her stamina. The piece she would perform in the competition was demanding, full of fast runs, difficult chords, and subtle changes in dynamics. She knew she had the ability to play it, but bringing it to perfection would take focus, patience, and resilience. Her family noticed her dedication. They gave her the space and support she needed, offering encouragement without pressure. They understood that this wasn't just about music. It was about her growth, her confidence, and her journey towards something larger than herself. At school, news of the competition spread quickly. Students whispered excitedly, some offering congratulations, others asking questions about how she prepared. Teachers seemed genuinely proud. Even students who had once ignored her now looked at her with admiration. But she remained grounded. She focused on the piano, on the music, and on the process of preparing herself, rather than on the attention it brought. The day of the regional competition arrived. The venue was filled with talented young musicians, each eager to showcase their skill. She felt a familiar flutter of nerves, but it was mixed with excitement. She had practiced for months, learned every note, every rhythm, and every subtle expression. Now it was time to let it all come together. When her name was called, she walked to the piano, her heart steady and her mind clear. The lights shone down, the audience watched in anticipation, and the judges waited silently. She took her seat, closed her eyes for a moment, and let her hands rest gently on the keys. Then she began. The music flowed from her fingers with precision and emotion. Each note was clear, each chord resonant. The piece, complex and demanding, seemed to bend to her will, transformed by her skill and passion. The audience listened, captivated, as the melody rose and fell, telling a story that words could never capture. Every fast run, every subtle shift in tempo, every delicate chord spoke of years of practice, dedication, and love for music. She felt completely absorbed in the performance. The world beyond the piano disappeared. She was not thinking about the judges, the audience, or even the outcome. She was immersed in the music, letting it guide her, express her, and reveal her true talent. By the time she reached the final notes, the room was filled with a palpable silence. Everyone held their breath, as if not wanting to disturb the lingering beauty of the music. Then, as the last chord faded, applause erupted. It started softly, then grew louder, until the entire hall was clapping, cheering, and standing. She rose from the bench and bowed, feeling a sense of fulfillment deeper than she had ever known. After the performance, the judges approached her. They complimented her technical skill, her expression, and the way she seemed to communicate the story of the music. They praised not only her talent but her presence, her ability to captivate an audience, and the confidence she displayed. She listened politely, smiling, but she knew that the true reward had been in the performance itself, the connection she had made with the music and the people listening. As she walked off the stage, other participants and audience members approached her, congratulating her and expressing their admiration. She felt proud, but also humbled. She had worked hard, yet she knew that talent alone was never enough. It took discipline, passion, and perseverance to reach this level. Her teacher, who had accompanied her, gave her a small, proud smile. "I told you," he said, "your music has power, and your dedication shows. No matter what the results are, you have already achieved something remarkable." The competition results were announced later that evening. She had earned recognition for her performance, placing among the top performers in her category. She felt a mix of excitement and gratitude, but she knew that the real achievement was the journey, the hours of practice, the courage to perform, and the joy of sharing her talent with others. In the weeks that followed, her reputation grew even further. Local newspapers featured her story, teachers from other schools reached out to learn about her methods, and students sought her guidance to improve their own skills. She remained humble, focusing on her music and the joy it brought her, rather than the attention it garnered. She also discovered a deeper truth, that her talent was not just for personal achievement. Teaching others, inspiring her classmates, and connecting with audiences were all part of the same journey. The music she played was a bridge, linking her dedication with the curiosity and excitement of others. She realized that by sharing her passion, she could make a real difference in the lives of people around her. Her family continued to support her quietly but proudly. They had watched her grow from a shy, reserved student who played in secret into a confident, skilled musician who could captivate audiences. They encouraged her to keep exploring her talent, to embrace the opportunities that came her way, and to always remain true to the joy of music itself. At school, she was no longer just the quiet girl in the corner. She had earned respect from teachers, admiration from students, and even a sense of inspiration for those around her. Yet she remained grounded. She practiced daily, played for herself as much as for others, and continued to grow as a musician and as a person. One afternoon, after a long practice session, she sat quietly at her piano, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the years she had spent playing alone, the secret hours of practice, and the moments when she doubted herself. She realized that each step, each challenge, and each performance had led her to this point. Her talent had been recognized, yes, but it was the dedication, patience, and love for music that had truly carried her. She understood now that success was not just about awards, applause, or recognition. It was about growth, connection, and the ability to touch others through something she loved. Music had given her a voice, a way to communicate her feelings and inspire those around her. It had shown her that even the quietest people could make the biggest impact when they trusted themselves and their abilities. In the following months, she continued to perform, both in school and in the community. Each performance brought new challenges and new lessons. She learned to manage nerves, to interpret music more deeply, and to connect with audiences in ways she hadn't imagined. She also began mentoring younger students, passing on the skills, discipline, and confidence she had cultivated. She saw the excitement in their eyes, the joy of learning, and the thrill of creating music. It reminded her of her own journey and reinforced her belief in the power of dedication and passion. By the end of the year, it was clear that her life had changed in meaningful ways. She had discovered her talent, nurtured it, and shared it with the world. She had earned recognition, inspired others, and grown as a musician and as a person. Yet she remained humble, grounded, and focused on the true joy of music itself. Looking back, she realized that everything had started with a simple moment, a teacher asking her to play a challenging piece, unaware of her true ability. That moment had opened the door to a journey filled with growth, discovery, and inspiration. She had faced challenges, embraced opportunities, and learned the value of perseverance, dedication, and courage. And as she sat at her piano one quiet evening, playing a piece she loved, she understood something important. True talent is not meant to remain hidden. When nurtured with care, shared with passion, and approached with humility, it can touch hearts, inspire minds, and create moments of beauty that last far beyond the notes themselves. Her journey was a testament to the power of dedication, the joy of music, and the importance of believing in oneself. She had transformed from a quiet, unnoticed student into a skilled, confident musician capable of inspiring everyone who heard her. And though the future held new challenges, performances, and opportunities, she knew she was ready. She would continue to play, to grow, and to share her music with the world, one note at a time. For her, the piano was more than an instrument. It was a voice, a companion, and a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of others. And with every piece she played, she left a little of herself behind, a reminder that passion, dedication, and courage could turn a quiet talent into something extraordinary.